Those of you who are still standing, I'd ask that you take your seats now. I'm Charles Stith. I'm the director of the African Presidential Archives and Research Center at Boston University. And I am pleased and proud to welcome you to this evening's forum. On behalf of our president ad interim, Dr. Aram Chebanian, and the trustees of Boston University, I would say that this for us is an auspicious and historic occasion. We're pleased to be a host for such an event. This represents the second part of a transcontinental conversation that started in Johannesburg, South Africa last week. These distinguished persons who will be arriving momentarily to address you are a singularly distinct and distinguished group. While we were in South Africa, I made the point that one of my favorite actors is Sean Connery. I've seen most of his movies and all of the James Bond movies. I loved him in Al Capone. But one movie which I have not seen in which he starred is this movie, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, a movie based on heroes and men of hope. But while I've not seen that movie, this evening we will have privy to our own League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. We could not think of a better person to moderate this forum than someone who has been a mainstay in Boston for a few years, someone who was our primary source of information, the leading station in terms of ratings during her tenure as the anchor at WBZ. She's now expanded her portfolio not only to include the work of the people, but the Lord's work as she prepares to graduate from the Divinity School at Harvard, but has recently inaugurated a new show, Sunday with Liz Walker. And it is absolutely a great format, utilizing her tremendous talent, I think, in very marvelous ways. And we're glad to welcome her here to moderate this panel. So if you would join me in extending a warm welcome with a rousing round of applause to Liz Walker, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Good evening, everyone. We have an exciting evening for you. We have much ground to cover. I am honored and humbled to be a part of this prestigious event with these distinguished gentlemen, world leaders. So if you would, please stand and welcome His Excellency Kenneth David Kaunda from the Republic of Zambia. His Excellency Ali Hassan Mwinyi from the Republic of Tanzania. His Excellency Joaquim Alberto Chissano from the Republic of Mozambique. His Excellency Karl August Hoffmann from the Republic of Mauritius. His Excellency Flight Attendant, Flight Lieutenant Jerry John, don't tell him I said that, Flight Lieutenant Jerry John Rawlings from the Republic of Ghana. Okay, I get one, that's one. His Excellency Aristides Maria Pereira from the Republic of Cape Verde. His Excellency Antonio Mascarenhas Monteiro from the Republic of Cape Verde. His Excellency Major Pierre Buyoya from the Republic of Burundi. His Excellency Sir Q. Ketomil Masiri from the Republic of Botswana, and the Lloyd G. Balfour African President in Residence. And His Excellency Nisifuri Soglo from the Republic of Benin. Welcome, and please be seated, gentlemen. I'd like to begin by giving you a brief biographical sketch of each of our panelists. His Excellency Nisifuri Soglo, served as president from 1991 to 1996 in Benin. He served as the Prime Minister, Chief of Government, and Minister of Defense of the Transitional Government of the Republic of Benin. He also served as Deputy Executive Director for the Board of Directors of the World Bank, representing 24 African states from 1979 to 1982. Following his presidency, President Soglo took a year sabbatical and wrote Democratic Change and Economic Reforms in Africa, the Case of Benin. His Excellency Pierre Buyoya, the Republic of Burundi, served 2 terms as President of Burundi, the first from 1987 to 1993, and the second from 1996 to 2003. In the interim, between his presidential terms, he created and served as head of the Foundation for Unity, Peace, and Democracy, a nonprofit organization dedicated to studying the institutional, judicial, and security systems of Burundi and issues related to peace and reconciliation in Burundi. He was recently appointed visiting senior fellow at the Watson Institute of Brown University until December 2005. His Excellency Sir Q. Ketomil Masiri, Republic of Botswana, co-founded the Botswana Democratic Party and served as president from 1980 to 1998. During his tenure, he was chair of the Southern African Development Community and now co-chairs the Global Coalition for Africa. He was knighted in 1991. President Masiri is the current Balfour African President in Residence at Boston University's African Presidential Archives and Research Center. His Excellency Antonio Mascarenhas Monteiro, Republic of Cape Verde, served as president in 1991 and was re-elected for a second mandate in 1996. Since leaving the presidency, Monteiro remains very active in his home republic. He participated as chair of the contact group the OAU sent to Madagascar in March 2002 to mediate the conflict that broke out in the sequence of the presidential elections of December 2001. In January 2003, President Monteiro participated in the forum organized by the Global Coalition for Africa dedicated to the subject of NEPED and security. His Excellency Aristides Maria Pereira, Republic of Cape Verde, the first president of the Republic of Cape Verde, Mr. Pereira played an important role in the building of the state of Cape Verde. During his 3 terms in office, Cape Verde was instrumental in several peace processes in Africa, mainly in southern Africa. He played an important role in the negotiations between South Africa and Angola and between the ANC and the regime of apartheid. He was among the first leaders in Africa who stepped down peacefully from politics when he lost a fair and transparent election in 1991. His Excellency Flight Lieutenant Jerry J. Rawlings, Republic of Ghana, directed the destiny of Ghana for nearly 20 years. He was the first elected president of Ghana in the 1992 presidential elections and was re-elected in December 1996. Throughout his presidency, he retained his rank as flight lieutenant in the Ghanaian Armed Forces. His Excellency Karl August Othman, Republic of Mauritius, began his political career in 1976 when he served successfully as Minister of Economic Planning and Development in 1983, Minister of Local Government and Cooperatives from 1984 to 1986, Minister of Social Security, National Solidarity and Reform Institutions from 1988 to 1991, and as Government Chief Whip from 1998 to 1991. President Othman then went on to serve as President of the Movement Socialist Militant Party from 1996 until 2000. President Othman served as the second Balfour African President in Residence here at Boston University's African Presidential Archives and Research Center. His Excellency Joaquim Alberto Chissano of the Republic of Mozambique. On September 20th, 1974, at the age of 35, Joaquim Chissano took office as Prime Minister of the transitional government that led Mozambique to the proclamation of its national independence on June 25, 1975, and was subsequently named Minister of Foreign Affairs. With the tragic death of President Samora Machel in 1986, Joaquim Chissano was elected President of the People's Republic of Mozambique. In 1994, he won the first multi-party elections in the history of the country and was re-elected President of the Republic in 1999. In July of 2003, he was elected President of the African Union. Chissano completed his term as President and stepped down in December 2004. His Excellency Ali Hassan Mwinyi, United Republic of Tanzania, was first elected President of Tanzania in November 1985 and re-elected to another 5-year term in 1990. He initiated Tanzania's political transition to a multi-party state. Under the terms of Tanzania's constitution, Mwinyi was barred from seeking a third term and completed his presidency in 1995 following Tanzania's first multi-party elections. His Excellency Kenneth David Kaunda, Republic of Zambia, led Zambia to independence and served as the first president of the Republic of Zambia from 1964 to 1991. In addition to his efforts in Zambia, Dr. Kaunda was in the forefront of the efforts to liberate all of Africa, serving as the president of the Pan-African Freedom Movement for East, Central, and Southern Africa in 1962, and chair of the Organization of African Unity from 1970 to 1973. President Kaunda was the first Lloyd G. Balfour African President in Residence at Boston University's African Presidential Archives and Research Center. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, let us welcome our distinguished panel. I'm going to start this evening with a few questions to our panel, and after that, there will be a half-hour question and answer session in which you can participate. We have a microphone set up for you here. So, without further ado, let me pose the first question to all of you, but Your Excellency President Masiri, I'll ask you first to take this question. You all have just met in Johannesburg, I understand, where you were briefed on information from the Commission for Africa, a set of recommendations to participate or precipitate Africa's full participation in global economy. You've also been hearing briefings about the Millennium Development Goals from the UN. After all of this information that you've received, how hopeful are you that Africa will realize its full potential? Please.
Is it live?
Yes, sir.
This?
I think it's on.
Uh-huh. Well, I think your question it's a good question. These are some of the developments which we have been awaiting. You will know that after at the end of the Cold War, there were changes in Africa. There was democratization. there was the opening of the markets. Economies at the time were all having negative growth rates. Now almost all economies are in Africa having positive growth rates. And the OAU has converted itself into the African Union. And the African Union has come up with a politico-economic program called NAPAD that is development, which aims at the development of Africa politically and economically. And it is emphasizing the fact that the Africans must make an attempt to lift themselves up with their own bootstraps. And in the process of doing so, they, of course, need help from those who have the wherewithal, because modern history has shown that if people do attempt to do things for themselves, other people do take courage to help them. And so the Blair report, Commission report, as well as the Millennium Goals, give us great hopes that not only are we trying to improve ourselves, but there are prospects that other people who have the means will also help us to help ourselves.
Your Excellency, President Chisano, could you answer that question for us as well?
Well, apart from what President Masire said, I would like to say that the Millennium Development Goals are of a big importance, for they were a unanimous decision by the leaders of the world to try and combat absolute poverty in a very short period. But it seems that we still have to discuss a lot on the implementation, because the efforts which are being deployed are not sufficient to make us reach the targets on time. It is by 2015. Africa is doing very well, but the North, the industrialized North, is doing very little. There are countries who are delivering, but the most powerful ones are not delivering enough. They have promised to contribute with 0.7% of their GDP for aid to development, but they are very short of their promises. Some don't reach 0.3%. Of course, there are some who are beyond the 0.7, but very few, especially the Nordic countries. So the challenges are very big. It's our role to try and convince people that these goals may be achieved, still may be achieved. That's why in September there will be a review of the work done since the year 2000. The leaders of the world will meet again at the United Nations. But this requires the attention not only of the leaders, but also of the great public, because the citizens, the taxpayers, are the ones who must actually understand the thing, that when they allow their governments, through their parliaments, through their Congress, to help the poor, they are also helping themselves. They are preparing their better life themselves. It's something which cannot be seen directly. But in the United States of America, people should understand, after the September 11, and after seeing what is happening around the world, the consequences of poverty, they must know that they may become that island of wealth, but encircled by a sea, an ocean of poverty. How can this island survive? I think that if the world is not helping to change the imbalance, if the world accepts this kind of globalization, the world is destroying itself. It will destroy not only the environment, but it will destroy the very human being, all the resources, human resources, which we have. So development in America or in France or in Britain will become meaningless if the rest of the world continues to be treated as it is treated. We must fight for equality. We cannot, in the United States, speak about equality, about democracy, if there is no participation of all in the benefits of what science brought. Science was not built by one man. Science comes from everywhere, comes from Africa indeed. Science, engineering, and whatnot. So we have to share knowledge. And this is the way of fighting poverty, of reaching the Millennium Goals, is through investment. There are lots of people who have to invest. There's no excuse for Americans not to invest in Africa. There's no excuse. They have to invest in order to help the countries to do good things. You cannot just claim that we should do better, we should do good things, we should respect human rights. How? There are lots of things which ought to be done. With poverty, it's very difficult to do. So I thank you, because the others are going to talk.
Thank you. Certainly, a couple of the factors that would pose serious risks to that kind of stability that you speak of would be conflict and civil war. And in this country, that's what we hear about. That's what the media tells us about in Sudan, in the Congo, and many other countries in Africa, of the violence. How can we get past that? And I'll open this question to any of you gentlemen. Is that a public relations problem? Is that a problem that Africa has to handle itself before we can get this global stability that Africa can participate in? Can I ask you, Your Excellency Buyoya?
Yes, I think it's first a question of communication. It's true that we have still conflict in Africa. In the country, you have just said, but also in other countries, in my country, Burundi. But I think the Western world, and especially the United States, doesn't have the true image of those conflicts. This country went through civil war, through conflict. Europe went through civil wars. Just recently in Bosnia, we have had civil wars. Then wars, civil wars, or other kind of wars is not African fatality. it's a human phenomena, then I think there is a need to have a good communication about those conflicts in Africa. Africa is a young continent. My country, Burundi, is only 40 years old of independence. Then we are still seeking stability. And on the way of seeking stability, you have civil war, you have a conflict. But I think we have to cut what means those conflicts, what kind of conflict we have. Second, I think Africans and African country, it's our responsibility to deal with those conflicts and to create conditions for investment, first for local investment and then for foreign investment. And NEPAD has to do with conflict resolution. The key element of NEPAD is to say that if we want Africa to develop, we have first to be able to create conditions of peace and stability. Of course, you don't create peace and stability from one day to another. But now Africa is developing the capacity of conflict resolution. Of course, we need here too assistance of United Nations, assistance of other countries of the world. But if we consider history, how conflict have developed in Europe, have developed in this country, in Asia, we can't say that Africa is exception. Then, in summary, I think we have to create a communication, and here it maybe is also our responsibility, showing that, yes, there is still wars and conflict in Africa, but we are developing also the capacity to solve them. And this is no obstacle for development.
Thank you. President Rawlings, we've talked a little bit about the African Union. Given the AU's intervention in Togo to force an election after the death of its long-term president, does this give us a glimpse of the future potential role of the African Union? How do you look at the African Union's effectiveness in the future?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you. Maybe I'd like to just make one or two comments on my brothers.
Please.
I don't know how well acquainted you are with what we used to call the Cold War between the East and the West until recently, until the collapse of the Eastern Bloc. We in Africa, in the Third World, were not suffering from the Cold War that existed between you. We were suffering from the hot war. Yes. And in other words, the ideological battles were transferred into places like Africa, multinational corporations, as well as the diametrically opposed ideological, whatever they were fighting for their own vested interest. And we were the victims in the process. And now that, of course, and we've paid a very serious price for it, with the demise, or the so-called demise, of the Eastern Bloc. Now the fight is, I think, is going to be between, let's say, between Europe and the US, Britain on the, on the appendage of the US, and well, as a politician, I'm not supposed to be saying some of these things, but quite frankly, I have nothing to lose. Some people are politicians, but some of us are patriots. And so it hasn't been quite easy for us. And it's been a very difficult situation. And now that Western multi-party democracy has been inflicted on some of us, and there are those who need... No, when I say inflicted on some of us, in my country, for instance, we've had a taste of multi-party democracy, we've had socialist system, we've had the capitalist system, we've had the one-party system, we've had the coups. None of them were accountable to our people till we had the revolt of 1979. And the price, generals had to pay for it. And, but let's say we're still fumbling and working our way out. And quite frankly, we're learning our lessons, and we've come a long way. And the necessary stability is coming to the continent. And I think we're beginning to enjoy the confidence of our own sense of nationalism, and I believe the outside world is beginning to wake up to the potential of our continent. However, there are still a few gray areas and black spots that create a problem for us. The ECOWAS community described the question you just asked me about Togo not too long ago as a coup d'etat by the young man who took over from his late father. In my opinion, it was not a coup d'etat. The coup d'etat took place 38 years ago. And the father dismantled the national army. We have various tribes in Africa, and ended up building an ethnic army. 90-something% of soldiers and officers were from his own tribe. So in effect, he was able to consolidate himself and stayed in power for that long. I hope Chirac and France, well, it's not just Chirac, but France will not be too angry at me. But, I mean, these are some of the colonial old masters who watched this kind of development, and they should have known where it was going to end up, that it would end up in a one-party, dictatorial regime. And yet, they watched it happen, to the detriment of other ethnic groups. With his demise, it gives us a fine opportunity, not just those of us within the ECOWAS community. We have our limitations. But quite frankly, if America is serious about wanting to see true democracy, to be nurtured in Africa, if the European Union wants to see that, and France also wants to see that, they should use this opportunity to open a new page in that country. However, let me say something very interesting. Those of you in America may not realize the effect of some of these things on us here, those of us in the third world. President Bush, I knew his father, the first President Bush. Very good man, good friend of mine, when we were both in office. And when his son emerged as your next president, of course, this is America. It's a democratic country, if you have the means. And no, don't stop me, and you're popular enough. There's no reason why you cannot win the votes of the people and become the next president. It's free and fair. However, how does it translate to some of us in the third world? We take it that, if the son of that man, that former president, can become the president, then I can begin to nurture my son to also take over. Go and do your homework. No. I know my colleagues are not too happy with what I'm saying, but but I'm not saying that this is what you find all over the place. But the point is that you begin to set a pattern and a tone that makes it easier for others to want to take the cue from your situation. But of course, he made it through money. I mean, the more money you have, I presume, the more you can you can harness the democratic electoral process to your advantage. Now, there are some who would say, well, fair enough, I don't have the money, but I have the bullet, or I have the gun, or I have all the means. I'm not saying that we should be doing that, but the point is, you have the money at your disposal, and if that, you can use that to get into office, others can use other means. So, in effect, for those of us in Africa, as we watch this, it was ringing an old music of nepotism. Nepotism is when you're creating room for your relations, to take positions, etc., or your tribal groups, etc., to begin, and you begin to position them, etc. I can cite a few places, but I will not. It'll be, yes. It'll only create a complication for me. However, the point I want to make is that I think with the demise of the old man, and much as we disagreed, I mean, we got along. And I don't think it's fair for his son to want to take over from his father. But that's quite understandable, because having built and sustained and survived in government using an ethnic army out of which you've created, one ethnic group out of which you've created an ethnic army, your only survival means that you would have to find somebody closest to him or the next person to take over that institution. Now, no, don't stop me yet. I'll finish. So, and that's what he did. Fortunately, the world brought pressure to bear, and the young man, thankfully, withdrew. Now, how can we put into place a mechanism that will ensure a free and fair election that would not, give an advantage to his ethnic group, okay? Because his ethnic group actually are the ones who are carrying the gun. But I'm hoping that he would have matured enough to see that the future, the beauty of what lies ahead, the peace and stability, that lies ahead, can only come by putting aside the gun and giving, an opportunity to every ethnic group in that country to have a free and fair election. And quite frankly, this can only happen not just from those of us in West Africa. We do not have the capacity, to do that alone. America will have to get involved. The European Union will have to get involved. France will have to play her part. Otherwise, we will only have a repetition of the old legacy. And quite frankly, this does not augur well for the future. And if they get away with it, others will not see why they shouldn't do the same things. You see what I mean? Thank you. But quite frankly, Madam, I think he will do what is right. Yes.
I think that His Excellency President Montero wanted to speak.
It's just a problem with it. He needs an interpreter. I don't have a microphone handy, so get over here.
Does that work?
Yeah.
And you're welcome to come over here, but this is a long way.
Oh, the wire's long enough. Great. Perfeito. Sim, pode falar.
Bom,
Excuse me, sir. We're going to take some questions if you would like to try to quietly get ready for that after he speaks.
ok. Bom, em primeiro lugar, queria dizer duas palavras.
First of all, I'd like to say a couple of things
dos conflitos em África.
sobre os conflitos about the conflicts in Africa. Interpreting is really easy.
Na sequência do que os meus colegas disseram.
Following what my colleagues have said.
Porque, efetivamente, não há desenvolvimento num clima de conflito e de instabilidade.
Because obviously you can't have development if there is a climate of instability and conflict.
E é nesta perspectiva que a União Africana e os Estados africanos individualmente considerados estão a fazer um esforço considerável para debelar os conflitos que ainda graçam o nosso continente.
And that's why the African Union and the individual countries are engaged in an effort to resolve and defuse the conflicts that are still causing much anguish on our continent.
No que toca ao Togo, concordo com a primeira parte da intervenção do meu irmão presidente Rawlings.
The first part of what my colleague President Rawlings said, I agree with completely.
Quando ele fala do primeiro golpe de Estado que levou ao assassinato do presidente Olímpio.
When he speaks of the first coup d'état that led to the assassination of President Olympio.
Mas já não estarei de acordo com ele quando ele afirma que o que aconteceu recentemente não foi um golpe de Estado.
But I disagree with him when he says that what happened more recently was not a coup d'état.
Porque o que é que aconteceu no Togo?
Because what happened altogether?
No dia 5 de fevereiro de 2005, faleceu o presidente Yadema.
On the 5th of February 2005, the former president
e segundo a Constituição togolesa, ele devia ser substituído pelo presidente da Assembleia.
According to the Togolese constitution, he should have been substituted by the president of the National Assembly.
Substituição interina, diga-se de passagem, para organizar as eleições no prazo de 60 dias.
A temporary substitution, we should say, to give them time to organize the elections within the span of 60 days.
Acontece que o presidente da Assembleia estava no estrangeiro no momento da morte do presidente Yadema.
The problem was that the president of the Assembly was out of the country at the time of the president's death.
Quando ele regressou, o avião não aterrou. Os militares não deixaram o avião dele aterrar em Lomé.
The problem, when he returned, the military did not allow his plane to land in Lomé,
Mas sim em Cotonou, no Benin.
but only in Cotonou in Benin.
E no mesmo dia, os militares investiram For Gnassingbé, filho do presidente defunto, no cargo de presidente da República.
And on the same day, the military placed the son of the former president in the post of president.
Portanto, neste caso concreto, os militares não assumiram o poder, mas entregaram-no a alguém.
So in this case, the military did not take power, but they handed it over to somebody.
De facto, da etnia deles, porque, como sublinhou o presidente Rawlings, o presidente Adama, o que fez foi criar um exército étnico.
And as President Rawlings said, they were of the same ethnic group, and that's what
Porque, de
the
facto,
first president had done.
80-90% dos generais togoleses são do norte.
Because, in fact, 90% of the Togolese generals are from the north.
Mais precisamente de Pia, que é a localidade onde nasceu o presidente Adama.
And more precisely from Pia, which is where President Diadema was born.
Por agora, são esses esclarecimentos que eu queria fazer.
Those are the remarks I wanted to make.
Thank you very much. I'm going to let some people. Yes, sir.
I think that's a conclusion which is lacking from the two speakers there. To answer your question, the prompt answer of the African Union is a sign of maturity of our continent, that we are ready to take our own responsibilities. And this is in the case of Togo, but it was also in the case of the other conflicts, Liberia, and other, even Somalia. Who thought 2 years ago that Somalia could have a parliament? Somalia can become a country again. It's because Africa has grown up. And this is something which people do not recognize. And you say, conflicts in Africa. Why don't we speak about the conflicts in the Middle East? Did you have any oil company from America which withdrew from Middle East because there's conflict? Or because there is a dictatorship when the elections took place in Saudi Arabia? Well, this is to complete that in Africa we have taken a decision. No more coup d'etats, no more seizure of power by unconstitutional means, whether it's a coup d'etat or not. We want democracy, a real democracy, a participative democracy. It's not just democracy of vote. It's what you eat, what you wear, where do you live, what water you drink. It's democracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone wanted to speak. Let's start with President Mwini, and I'll let you all speak. Just a second.
Complete, President Sisson. 1 minute.
Young people, good evening. Ours are young democracies in Africa. And as such, we are going through the teething problems of being young. I'm sure this is a passing phase. Hopefully, before very long, everything, or a lot of things, will be quite in order. I wanted to chip in.
Excellency, President Hoffman.
No, President Chisano, I do not disagree with you. In terms of the political will and suggestions, I do agree with you. But the point is, can we do it alone? What is France doing without France? I mean, the slaughter would have been, tremendous between the Rwandese and the Tutsis. Yes, the Tutsis and what you call it, and the Hutus. And ECOWAS attempted it. She couldn't handle it. France had to move in to hold back the thrust, from the north in Ivory Coast. America's intervention in Liberia and other places. I would have wished that we had the capacity, or they would assist us with the necessary logistics to be able to do some of these things ourselves. What about Congo-Kinshasa, etc.? So, in effect, that's what I was talking about when I said we lacked, the capacity, and not because we do not have the political will and the understanding, but we lack the logistics. Okay? Thank you, sir.
President Hoffman, did you want to speak?
Yes, I just wanted to give an example, very short one. People talk about violence, people talk about no democracy in Africa. But with 10 of us who is in front of you, is it exact answer to that question?
I'm going to try to take some questions from the floor.
Thank you. Is this on?
I think it is.
Okay, great.
Speak up,
Your Excellencies, it's an honor to address you this evening. My name is Diana Alberg, and I work with the Pan-African Children's Fund, which is a black church initiative that partners with African entities to provide support to orphans and AIDS-affected children in Africa. We discussed the Commission for Africa report that has recently been released. And my view is that there are two very bold proposals that are put forth as recommendations from that report. One is that half of the $25 billion in new aid be invested in health, education, and HIV/AIDS. The second bold proposal, in my view, is the call for 100% debt cancellation, which is a very different proposal than reducing debt reduction or debt alleviation. And so I would like to hear from you your opinions on the viability and how realistic these two, again, in my opinion, very bold proposals are that have been put forth by the Commission. Thank you.
Do you have anyone in particular you'd like to start that? Just open. President
Okay, I'm going to speak in French because to see that the Berlin Agreement cuts Africa in small pieces, English, France, Spanish, German, I think they are now Cameroon, Tanzania, and the other, and also Spanish. So it is good to show where we are coming from. To answer, I think, je vais parler français. Non, je crois que l'Afrique est la dernière grande frontière du monde.
I think that Africa is the last great frontier in the world.
Et le rapport de Tony Blair,
And the Tony Blair report,
j'ai le sentiment que c'est la fin du commencement.
I have the impression that this is the end of the beginning. Beginning of the end. Yeah, the end of the beginning.
Je dis ça parce qu'il y a quelques étapes importantes.
I'm saying that because there are certain very important
Je ne peux pas m'empêcher, en tant qu'ancien administrateur de la banque, que le rapport Elliott-Berg avait indiqué un certain nombre de causes expliquant le retard de l'Afrique. Tout le monde connaît ça. Le rapport Blair en parle. évidemment la longue déportation pendant 4 siècles de plus de 100 millions de ceux qui forment actuellement les Africains américains.
Because I'm a former board member of the World Bank, I want to talk a little bit about the Elliott-Berg report, which enumerates a number of causes for the delay in African development.
Donc je dis qu'il y a 100 millions d'Africains américains qui sont, pendant 4 siècles, ont été, disons, l'accumulation de capital qui a permis la révolution industrielle en Europe et naturellement en Amérique.
So there are 400 million African Americans who have contributed to the Industrial Revolution in the United States.
It is the accumulation of the capital which allowed
Say it in English.
Industrial Revolution in Europe and also here in the United States. The second, I think, issue, je suis désolé. La deuxième raison, c'est la colonisation. Ça, c'est le congrès de Berlin qui nous a coupés en petits morceaux. Et enfin, disons, la troisième partie, ça a été la guerre froide.
And the third part was the Cold War.
Alors, ce que la question qu'on pose, c'est que
The question that was asked is then,
après, disons, le rapport qui a été fait pour indiquer dans quelle direction nous allons. Okay. Disons, après le rapport Berg, le deuxième élément,
the second element
ça a été la coalition mondiale pour l'Afrique.
was African equality.
You have a global coalition after the first Berg report. Because it is something coming from Washington.
Yeah, it's talking English.
And we need to have that at the level of the African country. It's not coming from outside. So the gentleman was our chairman. When we have this global coalition, to allow all the African countries to take over his own destiny. And it is what we did. We are talking about the Marshall Plan. Why? Because after the Second World War, you have the same kind of pattern in Europe, in Asia. And they use, this pattern to get together all the small countries in Europe. They are now 25, half of the state of the United States. They have European Union. They have Euro. They did the same thing in Asia for Japan, with the so-called dominoes, because they opened the market here in the United States to their goods. So we say, why not? It is the reason the Tony Blair report is so important for us, because we are the last frontier in the world. And we need to move forward. The same, I think, medicine which work in Europe, work in Japan, in so-called dominoes becoming the dragon because they open the American market. It's our time now. So the report of Blair, we have to take that as the end of what we are looking for. The African countries, they took their own measure because they used to say you don't have peace, you don't have a good governance, you have corruption, different kind of thing like that. The man, I think, think you are looking here because he fought in his own country. Africa is doing his own way. Jerry Rawlings, of course, everyone know the job he did against something called corruption. So we don't need, because each country is moving forward. So the NEPAD become kind of code de conduite. I don't know how you say that in
Code of conduct.
Code of conduct. Because when we have we need peace. We talk about Togo. The African Union came in. It is an African story. We said it is time to stop the coup d'etat So we have our own, I think, code of conduct to how to solve the conflict in Africa. And more, the African Union is coming in. We have a peer, I think, to control what we are doing each other. And we are talking about the good governance. So what is in the report? First, if we want Africa to move forward, we need to cancel what they did for Iraq. The huge debts. It is a burden for us. It is a good proposal. Now it is to see how the one country are going to respond. The second thing, it is to see the kind of use we are going to, in what sector. When you want to move forward, you need to have education, and you need also health. These are the two major sectors we want, of course, to focus in this report. So it is, I think, the reason I am very hopeful, because I said it is the end of the beginning. It's what we want now. The next step, it is to take this hope and to make it work. So it is our
Thank you, sir. We're going to try from over there.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I want to thank all of you so much for being here tonight to help us better understand the situation in one of the last beautiful continents in the world that has not been taken over permanently by another culture, another country, another way of thinking. All my life I wanted to go to Africa. I studied Africa in any way I possibly could. This summer I had my opportunity. I went. And I'm telling everybody here who's never been, it's not what the media says it is. I chose Tanzania, and the reason I chose Tanzania was because I'm a real animal lover, and I desperately wanted to go to the Serengeti. And yes, is there poverty? Yes. Did it open my eyes? Arusha? You bet. Did it open my eyes in the Maasai villages? Yes. But I can tell you right now, there is an energy, there is a love, there's a brotherhood and sisterhood in Africa I have never found anywhere
I'm
else.
going to have to interrupt you, and that's beautiful.
All right, so let me get to the question.
But so many other people have questions.
Okay, let me get to the. I was actually getting there. Thank you. The question I wanted to ask tonight is: all of you are young countries. You haven't been independent very long, especially when you think of this country and our independence in 350 years, 400 years. We haven't really gotten it together yet either. My question is that is it just about the economics of it, or the question is who is going to be responsible for saving Africa for Africa? Because the interest, the money, the economy, as soon as it comes in, your resources, your culture, your way of life, it's going to change unless you. My proposal is what leadership or what kinds of thinking and philosophies and getting together has occurred and will continue to occur to make sure that other interests, other world interests who have good intentions but come in and take over, and the Africans lose their culture, lose what they have right now that is so special.
President Honda, would you like to take that, Your Excellency?
Madam Chair, Africa's problems, it is true, we need assistance from outside for solutions. But nothing can be done, nothing can be resolved without the people themselves being at the center. African problems will be resolved. I have no doubt about that. Look at the slave trade. It came. It was resolved. look at the colonial problem. Africa was parceled out, as we all know. It has been resolved. Apartheid in South Africa, it has been resolved. It's gone. Now we are fighting HIV and AIDS, a problem which has come. I'm confident we're going to resolve it. We need the support of outside, but in the main, these problems, as in the past, will be resolved by the African people themselves. Young lady who talked about the beauty of Africa, I appreciate greatly. She hasn't heard of Victoria Falls. It is one of the 7 wonders of the world. We didn't say that, others have said that. It is one of the 7 wonders of the world. Come, young lady, come and see Victoria Falls. Thank you for the love you have for elephants in Serengeti, but they're also there in other parts of the continent. So Africa's future is assured. It's assured. Many problems, yes. But please look at this desk, Madam Chair. Look at the people in front here. When did you first see a lineup of retirees like this? They have retired. They stood. Some were defeated, some retired, and they are still serving Africa. 12 of them. Tomorrow there will be 13. 2 more are coming. So you see, this is a big change.
Yes, it is.
And let us recognize it as change for the better.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm going to let President Pereira respond as well. Your Excellency, I know you have an interpreter there.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much.
Eu queria só confirmar ou corroborar o que disse o meu colega Kaunda.
I would just like to confirm and corroborate what my colleague Kaunda said.
Nós somos os mais velhos.
Since we're the eldest in this group here.
Quer dizer, lançar uma pequena retrospectiva à nossa história em África.
I'd just like to make a short retrospective of our story in Africa.
Encorajam-nos imensamente e basta, por exemplo, nós vermos, como ele citou, tudo porque a África já passou, para se ver que temos possibilidade, e vai ser necessariamente assim, de ultrapassar as dificuldades que vivemos neste momento.
All you have to do is look at all the things
com o tráfico de escravos, com o sistema colonial.
All the things he cited to see that we can overcome all these
com
obstacles.
a divisão da África.
With the slavery, the division of Africa, colonialism.
O colonialismo chegou ao ponto de dividir a África, separar a África.
All these things, colonialism.
Sem ter em conta a nossa realidade.
Went to the extreme of dividing Africa without paying attention to our reality.
Cortou esses povos africanos do curso da sua história.
So it actually cut off these African peoples from the course of their own history.
O essencial da questão.
We've already taken care of the essential parts of this issue.
Meu colega Kaunda,
as my colleague Kaunda stated,
liquidou-se a escravatura, liquidou-se o colonialismo, acabou o apartheid, e nós agora, os povos africanos, estão a fazer a sua história agora. Quer dizer, voltaram ao ponto em que foi cortado esse curso da história.
We conquered colonialism, we conquered slavery, we conquered apartheid, and now the African people have, in a sense, returned to the point at which they had their history interrupted.
E daí todos esses fenómenos normais, quando se fala das guerras, enfim, dos conflitos que têm havido e das outras questões que têm havido, isso é absolutamente normal. Porque, vejam, os povos africanos, cuja história foi cortada, a tendência, por os atuais dirigentes, é ir pegar a história lá onde ela foi cortada.
And all these conflicts, all these problems we've had, they're absolutely normal. All you have to see is to look at the current leaders in Africa and see that the tendency is for them to go back and take up the history of their own countries from the point at which they were cut off.
Ter assistido, por exemplo, a chefes de Estado africanos, chefe de Estado africano que se proclamou imperador.
There is even a former head of state who declared himself an emperor.
Isso só para provar que a tendência é ir buscar lá onde a história foi cortada. E nessa altura havia impérios em África.
That is just to prove the point that some leaders went back in history to try to retake history from the point where it had been cut off.
Não foi só essa questão também desse chefe de Estado que foi o Bokassa, que se proclamou imperador. Mas houve outros chefes de Estado africanos que, segundo dizem, só não se proclamaram imperadores porque sentiram vergonha.
And it's not just a case of Emperor Bokassa, who proclaimed himself an emperor, but there are several others who would have declared themselves emperors if they were not going to feel a little bit embarrassed about doing so.
Basta ver o culto da personalidade que determinados chefes de Estado africanos provocaram no país deles.
And you need only look at the cult of personality that several African leaders have instigated in their countries.
E só para dizer que, na minha opinião, o que está-se a passar em África é absolutamente normal, após todos os traumatismos sofridos durante séculos.
And just to repeat what I stated before, all the problems that Africa is facing are absolutely normal, considering all the traumatic events that occurred in the past.
E a pouco e pouco vê-se que a África está a aproximar-se cada vez mais do progresso e da modernidade.
We see that little by little Africa is moving towards progress and modernity.
E particularmente reconstituindo a nossa cultura, que foi numa certa medida pressionada e oprimida.
And reconstructing our culture that was in a certain way
e a partir desses
oppressed.
Dados, evidentemente, que o panorama que se vê hoje é diferente.
And you can see that today's situation is quite different.
De maneira que penso que temos todas as razões para ser otimistas quanto ao futuro da África.
That's why I think we have all the reason in the world to be optimistic about the future.
One more question. I know.
Your Excellencies, my name is Martin Owino from African Health Foundation. There are two things which really gets us down. One of them you have solved already by getting out of the driving seat to where you are now. You deserve an African clap. So, ladies and gentlemen, when I say one, you give them only one. To His Excellency's one. Now, my question is, Africa is only 10% of the world population. We host 2/3 of HIV/AIDS infection. Every day, 6,000 sub-Saharan Africans die with this disease. My foundation is trying to mobilize all Africans to go and help back home. But the problem I want to ask you is, as I run back and forth, the source of infection is heterosexual. The factors which drives that is the imbalance of gender power. And as we talk now, the UNAIDS have singled out women and girls as the prime victims for this disease. Now, as elders, as former presidents, and as statesmen, how can we balance the gender power between men and women so that when a lady says no, she can still stay at home and eat?
Madam Chair, that is an extremely important question. Like that young man, I'm running an organization called the Kenneth Kaunda Children of Africa Foundation, fighting AIDS. It's not an easy thing at all. It is an extremely difficult problem. Some of the programs we're undertaking in my foundation are opposed by some church leaders. For example, I can tell the audience, Madam Chair, that I lost a son, my wife and I lost a son to AIDS, 1986, December 23. He was 30. Left 6 children and a wife. After putting him to rest, my wife and I decided to help fight AIDS by fighting these prejudices around the disease. So I called a press conference and made it clear our son, had died of HIV/AIDS. I formed this foundation, Kenneth Kaunda Children of Africa Foundation, and began fighting this disease. Because I made that public, in order to fight the prejudices against the disease, I've been invited to various parts of the world to talk about this. I said, remember, prevention is better than cure. What does this mean? It means abstinence, keeping away from sex. But I went further to say, if you can't keep away from sex, as a matter of discipline, self-discipline, then use condoms. Male condoms, female condoms. When I said this, Madam Chair, I was condemned by some church leaders who said I was an evil man, I was promoting evil things. In reply, I said this. Some of the people I know who have died of AIDS were pastors, were reverends, were fathers, were sisters. If you had allowed them to use those condoms, they might be alive today. They might be allowed today, and they would give you a chance to help them spiritually recover. Now they are 6 feet down. You can't help them. They are finished. I said, go out there and get tested. Get tested. Whether you're a man or woman, find out your own condition. Leaders must lead by example. Leaders, teachers, policemen, police officers, soldiers, priests, politicians, like myself, must go out there and get tested. I'm not telling you what I didn't do. I went out there and got tested. I said, even if I had been found negative, positive, I would have said so publicly. That would have helped me to continue this fight. I'm negative, but I'm still saying go out there and get tested. Find out what your condition is. If we don't do these things, these mothers we're talking about will not be protected. We have to do these things, get tested, create conditions, places where people can go and get tested. This is how we fight HIV, AIDS. If we run away from this truth, we have no chance at all. Now, the area where we come from, most of us here, is the most infected area. Millions of our people have died. And AIDS is not choosing. It's not saying women only or men only at all. Experts tell us between 15 and 40, around 40 age group, which is suffering most. In Zambia, Madam Chair, when we took over government control, we found only 100 university graduates in 70 years of British rule. 100 university graduates. Only 3 of these were medical doctors. We invested our money from copper wisely. And by the time we left office, there were more than 35,000 graduates in Zambia. Today, because of AIDS, a good number of these are gone. They've died. Money invested wisely, money lost. Because of these conditions, terrible conditions we're having now, most of those have died, graduates, even nurses now, well trained in thousands. A good number of them are in Britain, a good number of them are in America, in Europe. They've gone to Australia. These are some of the problems we face because of AIDS, HIV/AIDS. But we need your assistance. We need your help. Stick to the truth, and the truth will help us. In the end, I can tell you, I'm confident. Good Lord is great, God Almighty. I'm confident as we defeated slave trade, as we defeated colonialism, appetite, we are going to defeat, in the name of God, HIV/AIDS.
Thank you. We want to thank our panel. We are way over time.
It's not over, Madame.
I have never known how to say no to him. What do I just do? Yes, sir.
No, to be quite honest, I'm also looking forward to the day when we as men will begin to accord womanhood in Africa the same degree of respect and justice as we think we deserve and desire. That will begin to change the political, social paradigm on the continent. I remember very well in the early 80s when some aspects of the Western media were looking for someone to inflict the source of AIDS on. I remember very well the paper, the Nigerian author's paper that was used to create the impression that AIDS came from Africa. I must say that we do have the natural weakness in the sense that if we could not do anything about family planning, quite frankly, I just couldn't see how we could control AIDS. The communal way in which we do things, etc., etc., and around about that time, we were not too sure the sources of it. However, much as I agree with my older statesman here, I sincerely do believe that it is extremely important that we begin to put into place not just, the appropriate laws that would make it extremely punitive, to prevent men from defiling and raping little girls as a way out. Because if we don't, it perpetuates itself. We create the impression as if you can do it and get away with it. And that way, quite frankly, we will not be able to contain it. And then we'll be coming back to your country, to, excuse me to say, the white folks, the developed countries, and say, help us. And then the question you'll be asking yourselves is, much as you need help, do you deserve it? What measures are you taking to prevent it? And this is where I think that we must take quite seriously the point that President Kaunda is making. So I do agree with the gentleman over there that we need to accord womanhood the same kind of respect that, we think we deserve. Okay? Yeah.
And I am sure that I speak for the women in Africa and all the women over the world. Long overdue, but thank you very much. We would expect and appreciate that. We thank you so much for this challenging but optimistic conversation about the continent. We would ask that you would remain in your seats until our distinguished panel leaves. And that means you, young man. I'm talking to you, baby. Come on, sit down. We thank you all. We'll let our panel leave, and have a good evening, everyone.